packing up and ready to go to the airport. Where's the Edward? Right, Edward? Exiting the bathroom.
See my smile?
Yeah. It was at this point that everything pretty much hit the fan. Our flight got delayed for 30 minutes for mechanical issues, and then it was another like hour and a half. And then they said, "Oh, your flight is canceled. We can't do anything for you, and you can't wait for another one." And so we booked the soonest one tomorrow, or the next day, which was at 8:30 a.m. We would have had to fly from Toronto to Raleigh, then drive like 2.5 hours down to Rock Hill, and then get to our place, and then pick up a new rental car, and we had this whole plan. So it was up to us to go back home, kind of recuperate, and then come back the next day and try to catch the first flight in the morning. So we woke up around 5:15 the next morning, which was Tuesday, and we drove all the way back to the airport. Then we got in line for security and customs with just under 2 hours to spare. And then at security, they just took a random 15-minute pause. Apparently it was to clear a backlog in customs. So we got through security, and then we had to wait another hour, probably hour and a half line for customs. All the while our flight was gonna leave in like 30 minutes. So we were definitely freaking out there. We ended up missing that flight by about 15 minutes. It was taxiing just as we were walking up to the customs officer. So we had to book another flight that flew out around 2:40, flew to Washington and then to Charlotte. And then we had to get a different rental car just so we would make it in time, but there'd be no time for any practice rounds or any sort of things like that. But the important thing was that we were going to make it there. The course for the first day, first round. Let's do it. Bang. Driving to Winthrop. So for the players area, they had this huge practice field, and they had a bunch of them. This is me warming up my shots here, and I'm about to shank my Wraith in front of Chandler Fry, which is pretty hilarious. I throw it like right into the ground. This is me just trying to get as warmed up as possible to play the course blind, because I got there the night before. Even just walking up to the tee pad of one felt unreal. Pretty cool.
Teeing off first, representing Texas, Jacob Sanders.
Yeah, good shot.
Representing Canada, Joe Vanderbeek.
Stepping up to hole 1 at Winthrop, playing it blind, first round USDGC, is pretty much as nervy as you can get. And it shows right here in my first shot. I made the Mandos, but I hit the first tree after that. But honestly, I was just happy to be inbounds. Lining up the approach here about 90 to 100 feet away, and I just fluffed it so bad. Luckily, I snuck into the circle, and I canned this 30-footer right here. I did not want to start off that hole with the bogey. After a pretty good drive on 2 with my DD3, I went with the same disc again, forehand, trying to skip off the parking lot. I thought I threw this too low initially, but it actually caught edge and ended up about 20 feet. And there's my first birdie of the event. It's also pretty nervy stepping up to hole 3, having no practice, so I decided to go with the forehand out to the left and then hyzer back in. I threw this as hard as I could downhill, and I ended up going like 40 feet long, and it was in the hazard. So I'm putting back at the basket for my par from about 40, gave it the good height, and I cashed that right there. I decided to throw my Explorer on hole 4 to get a little bit of an understable flight. I punched that through the gap perfectly, and I ended up almost in an ideal spot. On my second shot of hole 4, I was worried about going too close to the Mando tree, and it's such a sharp angle to the right, so I pulled my forehand a bit, ended up a little bit long, and it was not my greatest effort from there. This is just a pitch up for par, but I caught some early branches, and that leaves me about 30 feet downhill for the par. Luckily, my putting was feeling good that day, so I managed to save par on 4. On hole 5, I went with a forehand DD3. I didn't want to get special or anything with like a turnover backhand, so I just guaranteed myself a shot in the middle of the fairway, and that turned out really well. I'm just trying to get another 350-ish feet on my second shot. I go buzz, but pull it a bit to the right. Luckily, it kind of filters through those trees and lands in the middle of the fairway. And now I have the crossing water shot. I throw my Explorer here, and I misread the wind a bit. I thought it was a tailwind, but it turned out to be a left to right, so it pushed it way over, and this is just a layup to save the 5. Hole 6 was one of the best holes of my round. I went with my understable Onyx on a hyzer. It held straight, and then had a good skip up to the edge of the beach at the end. 30-footer here for birdie. That felt so good. Hole 7 is really not a hole you want to play without any practice. I was trying to read the left to right wind and throw my buzz on a little bit of anhyzer, let it drift in, but the wind got under it and lifted it over the bamboo, and so I'm going to be throwing from the drop zone. I throw a forehand with my Logic just to try to give it a little bit of a run, but I did end up about 20 feet long into the headwind, and a little bit of luck there as it goes band and in. I was trying to cut hole 8 in half off the tee with my Explorer, but I early released it a little bit and it goes right into the middle of that tree. Luckily though, it stays in bounds. My second shot is a forehand just to set myself up for the par. I thought I threw this too low at first, but it got over those bushes and it ended up in a really nice spot to save the 4. This is a Logic upshot about 90 feet, and that's tapping in. Hole 9 with the controversial mozzarella sticks off the tee. I saw some of my card mates carry too far left because of the crosswind, so I hung my Thunderbird out really wide, and I spiked in right in circle 1. This is my birdie putt, and I just pulled this a tiny bit. Could have gone either way, but that was frustrating. Alright, I've got some explaining to do on hole 10. I was 2 under heading into it because I birdied 2, 6, and 9, and I got a bogey on 7. I was trying to do kind of what Nate Sexton does and throw the forehand up the left side just to play for the layup, but some bad things happened when I pulled it, hit the Mando tree, kicked straight out of bounds. So I'm advancing to the drop zone. It's just over 300 feet. I'm throwing my Firebird out to the right, but the headwind just picked up and flipped it up, and so it never came back in, and it was about 2 feet out of bounds. So I'm going to pause again here because my dad missed 2 of my next shots. I was in shock after being out of bounds again, and I threw a PD2, completely grip locked it, almost went into the tennis court on the right. Then I threw my Macbeth 4-time Destroyer, which was supposed to be stable. I kind of grip locked it again, and it turned over, never came in bounds. Now this is my 4th shot from the drop zone with a Star Destroyer, and it's another complete shank to the right. It was so weird. I could not throw straight for 4 shots in a row. So this one goes straight out of bounds again, and then I'm throwing, I think, my 10th or 11th shot after that, I throw a Thunderbird inbounds in circle 2, and then I pitch up and I take a 13. After taking a +9 on the previous hole, throwing a good shot on hole 11, which is one of the hardest holes on the course, is a pretty tall order. I was trying to throw my Onyx up to the right side, but I got it completely nose up and it landed right in the middle of the hazard. At this point, I didn't even know what was happening. I threw my Destroyer here to try to get up and down for the 4, but I threw it too low and it almost cut rolled back. This is my zone to try to pitch up to save a bogey, but it lands about circle's edge short and right. Then I have this putt for bogey, just low off the cage, and I tapped in for a double. Hole 12 is also one of the tougher holes as it's a 900-foot par 4. I throw my Macbeth Destroyer flat and it gets some good turn into the headwind and lands right on the spine. That was my first good shot in a while. I didn't want any part of that birdie, so I laid up with a hyzer to take a 4.
That's very nice.
Hole 13 at Winthrop is also one of those holes that looks way easier on camera when the touring pros throw it. I'm throwing DD3 and I shank it a little bit right, not the worst, but it does get lucky through that tree and ends up inbounds on the left side of the path. Now I'm throwing my second and I totally misjudged the distance here. I also didn't know there was OB in those pines on the right, and that's exactly what I found. But I had never played the course before, so I had no idea. After pitching out from the OB, this is trying to save a bogey, and I throw it 50 feet long, and it's OB long across the parking lot. So I'm in shock again. This is to save a triple bogey. I throw my zone out to the left, comes back in, and it's parked. And it was pretty deflating to take another huge number, especially when it had to do with me playing the course blind and not knowing where the OB was. So on 14, I threw my buzz here just a little bit too high and it fades out, ends up about 50 feet long and left in the hazard. So I try to save the par, but it's just off to the right and that'll be a bogey. On 15, the triple Mando hole, I actually managed to get something going again. I threw it straight down the pipe with my Destroyer and I had a great finish, but I got a little bit unlucky with this lie. I had to throw my zone between those two trees and it was actually a great shot. Gave me like a 20-foot birdie putt and I wasn't going to miss that after taking those big numbers. I saw my cardmate Jacob absolutely park this with an Explorer, so I went with a similar disc, my Instinct, and out to the left, then a slow turn, and I got really lucky as I was going to go long, but I hit the mozzarella sticks to be almost parked for the birdie. 17, this was really nervy. It could go really bad or really well. I was trying to play safe to the right, but I grip locked my forehand a bit. I ended up ace running the basket, and I was pretty much parked for the birdie, which was a really good feeling. People don't give hole 18 enough credit for how hard it is. It looks way more flat on camera, but in real life it's so uphill. So I threw a decent drive with my buzz, then threw a second shot which cut rolled and went OB. Then I threw my Firebird from there, skipping around to the left, and I was parked for my bogey. I was just super happy that we made it to Rock Hill, even though I didn't get any practice in, and I'm super excited to bring you the round 2 coverage soon. So I hope you really enjoyed this coverage, and make sure to subscribe for future videos.